Hey guys, what's up? Nick here once again, and we're going to be doing another tier list today on Twisted Metal Small Brawl. It's probably one of the most overlooked games in the entire series, and I've made a whole video talking about the game itself and why I do feel it is underrated, and I do still have a good time with it coming back to it even after all these years, and I feel a lot of people overlooked it just because it was technically centered towards children. That being said, we're going to go through all the vehicles in the game, and I'm going to give you my personal opinion on the ranking for each individual car based off their stats and how they play in the game. So starting out at number 1, we have Shadow. Now, looking at their stats alone, their armor is around a 60%, acceleration is at 40%, their top speed is at 30%, and their handling is at 70%. So stats alone, not that impressive, if anything, kind of on the meh side of things, but actually in playstyle they are a lot of fun and probably one of the main characters I actually choose every time I come back to this game. They feel a lot stronger than only 60% when it comes to their armor. They truly feel more like a Warthog character from the previous games, where they weren't super fast but they weren't slow either, but they had a lot of armor, they could take a lot of hits, and they had a pretty good special weapon, and that is the best case to describe Shadow in this game. His special weapon is a Grim Reaper that shoots out the front, and it does home a little bit on to the enemy, but it's pretty lackluster. So luckily they give you the option to detonate it whenever you'd like to do damage if you do miss the character. But doing a direct hit does a ton of damage compared to other specials in the game, so it's by far one of my favorites to use. It doesn't go through walls or anything special like that, but the fact that it does home in a little bit onto the enemy is a pretty cool little feature. But yeah, other than that, with their medium speed and really good armor, I truthfully have to put Shadow in the S tier category. Next is Specter. As you guys may or may not know, Specter is my favorite character in the entire series of games. I've always loved playing as them. I enjoy their background character and everything, and of course their special weapon, which is the Ghost Missile. Now, this is the first time in the Twisted Metal series that they kind of went away with the stereotypical Ghost Missile that Specter uses, and this time around, he literally shoots out 3 ghosts that chase after the opponent. They still have the same properties as the original Ghost Missile, where it does go through walls, it's pretty quick, and it's pretty accurate. It's kind of hard to miss the actual character, but it can happen from time to time. However, I gotta admit, this is probably my least favorite Specter in the entire series. Now, its design I think is fine. I think it looks pretty cool. It's a little bit more science fiction for my liking, but it's definitely better than Twisted Metal Black's design in my opinion. But in terms of the special weapon and the feeling of the vehicle and playing as them, this is by far the weakest version in my opinion of Specter. He just doesn't feel that fast to me. I don't know what it is. It could be the game engine, because this is a much slower paced game, just like Twisted Metal 3 and 4, but this game feels even slower than 4 at times in a lot of ways. So yeah, Specter doesn't feel very quick in this game. He has really weak armor, as you'd come to kind of expect with his character. But his special, even though it does shoot out 3 ghosts that chase after the characters, it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. I think it actually does less damage than most of the Specters in previous games. So this does really pain me to say, but I'm going to have to put Specter in the B category. And the main reason for that is because even though his special isn't that great, it still does a decent amount of damage, so it's far from useless. And again, it's very hard to miss. It almost every single time will hit the character. So yeah, his major downside really is his armor, and he just doesn't feel fast enough in my opinion. Moving on to Sweet Tooth, we have the poster child here of the entire series, and I don't really have too much of an opinion on him in this game. I think he's just okay. He's not amazing in any certain category. He's not terrible either. He is fun to play though. He feels pretty good in this game. He doesn't feel too sluggish or too top heavy like he did in Twisted Metal 3 for sure, or 2 even. He does feel a little bit faster and less sluggish, but in terms of his design, not a huge fan of it. It looks too cartoony for me. It's just a little bit too, I don't know, cheesy. And then on top of that, his special is pretty decent this time around, but it does take a little bit of skill to use it effectively, because it essentially is like a hockey puck that it slides across the floor, it bounces off the walls, and you can do quite a bit of damage on people if you can hit them multiple times, but more often than not, you're going to only hit them once, and it's not going to do a whole lot of damage. But again, if you can hit somebody multiple times with this one special, it will do a ton of damage. So for that, I'm going to have to bump him up a couple points, and I'm going to put him in the A tier. Next is Thumper, and they pretty much completely stripped this character from Twisted Metal 3. It even looks the exact same and relatively has the same special weapon that involves a boombox that shoots out radio waves at your opponents instead of the typical flamethrower we've known with Thumper in the past. That being said though, looking at his stats, he only has a 50% armor, 60% acceleration, 40% top speed, and 80% handling. So his stats are pretty middle of the road, so to speak, but in actual gameplay, I think he is one of the stronger vehicles in the game. He feels really strong in terms of his armor, a lot like Shadow, where he can take a lot of hits. He doesn't feel slow in any way, shape, or form compared to other cars in the game. He feels pretty quick. His handling is really good, and his special weapon, I will say, it does take a lot more skill to use this time around because it doesn't just shoot one little 5 or 4 second frequency wave of sound to do damage in front of you. It actually shoots out 3 separate, almost like Captain America shields is the best way to describe it. It shoots 3 separate ones in 3 different intervals, and they do bounce off walls that can do double damage. So if you are able to hit somebody with all 3 of the rings, it does quite a bit of damage. It's just you have to aim it really well or get them in a spot where they really can't run away from it, because it is pretty easy to miss people with his special. But the fact that he is pretty strong in this game, he has really good armor, he's fun to drive around with his good handling, decent speed, and if you're skillful enough, his special can do a massive amount of damage. I'm going to have to put Thumper in the S tier. Next is Trapper. This is a brand new character to the series, and truthfully, I do like his design, I like his character, but I really would have just rather had them bring Minion back, because we all know this is supposed to be Minion. He's the first boss in the game out of 2 major bosses in the tournament, and he feels and looks a lot like Minion would. He's just not a tank this time around. But that being said, I do like the design. He feels really strong and beefy, as he should. He's a boss character that you have to unlock, and his special weapon is really cool. It's one of those like old school monkey in a barrel type toys, but it spins around, and if it hits an opponent, it'll actually multiply into more monkeys and it'll do more damage, and it'll keep bouncing off the wall just like Sweet Tooth Special and do a ton of damage. And of course, on top of that, he has an insane amount of armor. He's rated at 80% armor. His acceleration and his speed are where he really has his downside at only 20%, and then his handling is around 50%. So with that though, I mean, again, his only downside is he's slow. Everything else is really damn good, so Trapper is going to be an S tier character. Next is Twister, and this time around, I actually really like what they did with Twister's character. I think the design is fine. It's pretty much the exact same as Twisted Metal 2's design, but they 100% fixed their special weapon. So in Twisted Metal 2, when you used Twister's special, you had the ability to essentially crush yourself because other characters would ram into you while they were in your special, or they could attack you or freeze you. And it was really annoying, and more times than not, it ended up just hurting yourself or getting yourself killed. So Twister was a really big downside and a really big upset, at least in my opinion, where I love their design of their character. They were fun to drive around with, and I like the idea of a tornado vehicle, but it's just the execution of the special wasn't that great. However, this time around, I feel they kind of went a little bit overboard in terms of making it way better, to the point where it's overpowered. So the tornado just appears above your vehicle, you run into other opponents, and they all get sucked into it, and you can have literally every single opponent in the arena inside your tornado at once. While they're in it, they're taking damage, and at the very end, it throws them against a wall and does another huge burst of damage. So yeah, their special is by far one of the best, if not the best in the entire game, in my opinion. The only downside to Twister is their armor. They are one of the weaker vehicles at 20% for their armor, but everything else, top speed and acceleration are at 100%, and their handling is at 50%. So yeah, the only downside to Twister is their armor. So truthfully, they are the definition of a glass cannon, and I have to give them the S tier ranking. Man, I'm actually surprised at how many S tiers I'm doing this time, and I promise it's not because like, oh, I love Twisted Metal Small Brawl, it's the best game in the series. It's nothing like that. It's just I actually really do like the way that they designed the vehicles this time around and how they feel in gameplay. And yeah, I just have to give them the praise that they deserve. However, that comes to our next car, which is Warthog. And this is by far, in my opinion, the worst car in the game. I don't know what they did here. I think it's just because Warthog has always been kind of that jack of all trades character that is the most easy to pick up and play. So it's kind of that first vehicle most people go to, which is they have medium speed, medium armor, a medium special, and a medium handling, and they're just kind of that, you know, middle of the road jack of all trades character, like I stated before. And they're usually really good. I mean, I really have never had many complaints when it came to Warthog, other than that he feels a little sluggish sometimes, and his special maybe isn't as strong as it could be. And then Twisted Metal Black, they just made him above and beyond way better. But now, for some reason, this time around, they decided to make Warthog like almost a Specter reject in a way. So they gave him really low armor. He has 20% armor. You heard me right, only 20% armor. And his acceleration and speed are relatively fast, but still not as fast as it should be for how low his armor is. It's only at 70%. And then his handling is at 70%. So at that point, you're like, okay, well, maybe they made his special really strong, you know, right? Maybe he's a glass cannon. But no, his special is the same pretty much as he's been in every Warthog, where it's just the 3 missiles, and they're the red, white, and blue. And it looks unique and cool, but this is by far the weakest version of that special weapon. Not only is it super inaccurate, 90% of the time the missiles don't even hit or land on the opponent you're aiming at, no matter which distance you're at. And then if it do get a hit with them, it does almost no damage. Like, it is by far the weakest special in the game, and being that he's also a super weak character, he's just not fun to play as. So yeah, it's really sad to see, but Warthog is trashed here. Next up is Axel, and it's really good to see him make a return here in this Twisted Metal. He's actually a bonus character you have to unlock throughout the game. You don't just get him right away, which is really cool, just like he was in Twisted Metal Black. And this is the first time that Axel has gone away with his traditional shockwave special. So he doesn't send people flying in the air like he used to in the past and doing damage that way. Instead, he shoots out one lone missile, and it's pretty accurate, but you have to be kind of quick with it because it's a little slow and it can miss easily. So if it does miss the person, you'll start spinning rapidly, and it'll just shoot rockets in random directions and won't do much damage to anybody. However, if you do get that missile to hit, you'll start spinning, and you will shoot a huge amount of missiles into one character, doing a ton of damage. So his special is really strong if you are accurate with it. And then looking at his other stats, his armor is at roughly 50%, his acceleration top speed are at about 35%, and then his handling is at 90%. So his handling is really tight and responsive, but he's not very fast. He's kind of on the sluggish to slow side, which is kind of a bummer, because in the previous games with Axel, he actually was really fast and he felt really good to play as. So this time around, he's a little on the sluggish side, which is kind of a bummer, but his armor is really decent. It's not terrible by any means, especially being that he's open to the elements, right? But maybe because their RC vehicle is not a real person in between 2 wheels this time, maybe they decided we'll give him a little bit extra armor, and that's good to see. So yeah, decent armor and a really good special. His really only downside, he's a little bit on the slower and sluggish side. So normally I would have put him in the S tier category, but because of that, we're going to bump him down to an A tier. Next up is Crimson Fury. Really good to see them make a return. This is the first time seeing them in a Twisted Metal game since the very first OG one, and I've missed him. I always loved the idea of some type of like James Bond spy character in the Twisted Metal series, and it's good to see them back. I love the design of the vehicle. It looks just like it did in the original with that red sports car. It's very fast. It's got decent handling. But looking at their stats, it's kind of interesting. So, of course, their armor is on the weaker side because it is a sports car. Makes sense. Their acceleration and speed are at 95%. That makes sense. It's a very fast vehicle. However, their handling, for some reason, is only 50%. I don't know why they made his handling so sluggish in this game, and you do feel it. Especially if you're playing as Specter or Mr. Grimm. Going to Crimson Fury, it just does not feel nearly as good to play as. So that was kind of a weird choice. And then the last thing is his special weapon. So in the original Twisted Metal, his special weapon really sucked. It was really weak. It did barely any damage. And it's kind of the same thing here. It's a lot better, don't get me wrong, but it's still kind of inaccurate. It's difficult to hit all 3 of the missiles, and there are 3 paper airplanes that are on fire. And if you get all 3, you can do a little bit of damage, but it's mostly the fire damage that'll do most of it if the character does stay on fire. But for the most part, yeah, his special is just kind of mediocre. I wish it was stronger than it is, or at least more accurate, so you didn't worry about missing 1 or 2 or more of the 3 paper airplanes. But I don't know. I'm just glad to see him back, and I do hope we see more of him in the future Twisted Metals that are to come out. But for now, sadly, we're going to have to put Crimson Fury in the C tier. Next is Darkseid. Really glad to see them back, and this is the first time I think that he's not a black semi-truck. It's a blue semi this time around. kind of an interesting look to it, but I don't mind the look at all. That being said, playing as him is a lot of fun in this game. He feels extremely powerful. I mean, just looking at his stats, he has a 100% armor, which makes sense. He feels super strong in this game. His only downside is his acceleration. Like, even his top speed is pretty damn high, around 75%. So he's very quick in this game, even without his special. And his special weapon is the exact same as Twisted Metal Black. It just gives you a speed boost, and you can ram opponents out of your way. However, it's not a one-time use. The actual speed boost lasts for a good like 10 to 15 seconds. It lasts for quite a while. At least it feels like it does. And you can actually keep moving back and forth and ramming the same person multiple times to do a ton of damage with his special weapon. He is actually insane in this game if you use his special correctly. So really his only downside is his handling and his acceleration, which in this game's engine, the acceleration doesn't really matter. Everybody feels kind of slow in their own way. So it really comes down to his top speed, which is really good. So yeah, his only downside is his handling, which is kind of sluggish, I guess. But in most of the time, you're not going to notice it. So for me, Darkseid is an S tier this time around. Next up is Hammerhead, and I'm so thankful to say this, that they actually finally gave us a Hammerhead that isn't trash. He's actually pretty good in this game. So I like his design. It clearly looks like a toy car in this game. You know, the coloring scheme could have been a little better, but the fact that his special weapon for the first time actually looks like it does something. So the closest we've gotten to Hammerhead having a special weapon that seemed like it actually did something when you click the special button was Hammerhead in Twisted Metal 3, which is super sad to say because that character sucked. But at least in that game, you got a little bit of a speed boost that sent you forward so you could ram opponents. Now in this game, your wheels transform into these giant monster truck wheels with spikes on them, and you get a massive speed boost to essentially run over the character. You stick to the top of the character, and you grind away their car with your metal spike wheels. And it looks really cool, it feels really cool, and it does a decent amount of damage. It's not super strong, but it's enough to make a significant impact, especially on a weaker vehicle like Mr. Mime or Mr. Grimm. But on top of that, though, his armor is actually really decent this time around at 75%. His acceleration is around 40%, and his top speed is around 20 to 30%, and his handling is at 30% as well. So when looking at his stats alone, clearly his downside is his speed and handling, but in reality, it doesn't feel that bad in actual gameplay. But it is definitely more sluggish than most characters. So if I was to degrade anything from Hammerhead in this game, it would be, of course, his color scheme of his design and the sluggish handling / speed. So I'm gonna have to move him down to A tier, but he is still a very, very high A tier because his special is just that cool. And we just finally got a Hammerhead that isn't trash. Like, he's actually fun to play. Next is Mr. Mime. This is another brand new character to the entire series with Small Brawl. I like what they went with here. It seems kind of like a concept vehicle more than it is a real vehicle in the game. And granted, you do have to unlock him with a special means of doing so. It's not just a character you have at the beginning. But he's interesting in the fact that his special weapon is literally everyone's special weapon. And I don't mean that like he can use everyone's at once. It's essentially when you cycle to it, it'll randomly choose a special of whoever you're fighting against in the actual map. So let's say you're going against like Mr. Grimm, Mr. Slam, Outlaw, Specter, and Twister. If you start cycling through your special, you'll get one of theirs and you can use it against them. And it does the exact same amount of damage as it would as playing as that other character. So his special is by far obviously the best in the game because you can have anyone's that you really want, which is really cool. But that's pretty much where the goodness stops. His armor is extremely weak. I think he actually is the weakest car in the game. I think he has less armor than even Mr. Grimm, which is really saying something. So yeah, he's super weak. He's not very fast. He's roughly around 40 to 50% for his top speed and handling, or his top speed and his acceleration, and then his handling is at 70%. So his stats alone don't seem too bad, but in actual gameplay, he feels really slow. And because his armor is so weak, you pretty much have to stay away from almost everybody. So yeah, the fact that his only benefit is his really good special weapon, I will bump up a couple points because of that, but yeah, the highest I can go with him is a B tier. Next up is Mr. Grimm. So this, of course, is the motorcycle character that we've seen in every single Twisted Metal. Absolutely love playing as him. I love that he keeps coming back in all his games. And I do really like his design this time around. I think he's one of the better looking Mr. Grimms. I never really liked the 3-wheel with the extra cart design of Mr. Grimm. I like him just a single motorcycle like we had in the very first game. This time around, yeah, he's a single motorcycle, doesn't have the sidecar. He just looks a lot better. I like the flames and everything, even though it's kind of cheesy. It fits him, I think. And he feels really good to play. He's very quick. He feels tight in his controls. Looking at his stats, of course, his armor is 20%, very weak. His acceleration, top speed are around 70%, and then his handling is also 70%. The only downside clearly to him is I feel he should be at 100% with his speed and handling. I don't know why they lowered it a little bit. And actually, Twister is faster than him in this game. At least it feels that way. So it's kind of weird that they lowered his speed for Mr. Grimm when he's a motorcycle. It just kind of feels a little weird. And then on top of that, his special weapon is pretty much the same as we've seen in the other games. It's a straight shot. It doesn't home in on the opponent or anything. You have to be very accurate with it, but it does a massive amount of damage if you get a direct hit. And I do like the design of it. It's 2 little pumpkins that fly through the air, and it looks really cool. But it doesn't feel as strong as it could be. It feels kind of like Twisted Metal 3's Mr. Grimm, just with a better design overall. So that being said, even though I love Mr. Grimm, I love the concept, I love the motorcycle, I like his design a lot, the lackluster special weapon and the lackluster speed and handling, I gotta bump him down to a B tier this time around. Next up is Mr. Slam. I'm so glad to see him back again. The last time we saw him was in Twisted Metal 4, and he was pretty lackluster that time around, so it's good to see him back to his roots here. He looks exactly like he did in Twisted Metal 2, and he is by far just as good, if not better, as a character in Twisted Metal 2. So looking at his stats, he has a 90% armor, which makes sense. He has, surprisingly, a 75% acceleration. However, his top speed is only 30%, and then his handling is 60%. So decent handling, decent stats all around, to be honest with you. And actually in gameplay, those are pretty accurate. He feels really fluid. He feels pretty quick. He doesn't feel slow by any means, even though he is a construction vehicle. And even though Mr. Slam in Twisted Metal 2 felt very sluggish and slow, that is not the case here at all. Like, he actually feels pretty quick, pretty agile, easy to handle, and his special weapon is by far one of the strongest in the game. It does a ton of damage if you can get a direct hit, and even if you miss, he still slams on the ground and creates a shockwave like Axel's special would have been. And it sends people flying for crowd control and does decent amount of damage. But obviously, the most damage you can do is a direct hit on somebody, and it slams them multiple times. And not only that, but if you're on a level where you can send someone off the level to kill them, of course, you can pick them up and chuck them off and get free kills. So yeah, you know where I'm going with this. Mr. Slam is clearly an S tier character. Next up is Outlaw, and this time around, this has got to be my least favorite version of Outlaw in any Twisted Metal. And that's really saying something, because they've been in every single game pretty much. I don't think there has been one yet they haven't been in, except for in Twisted Metal 4, but Meteor Maid was pretty much Outlaw. That being said, though, Outlaw this time around is really mediocre all the way around. That's like the best way to describe them. Very, very, very mediocre. So their armor is only 30%, which is ridiculous. They should definitely have more armor than that. Their acceleration top speed is at 40%. So again, kind of slow. They definitely should be a little faster being a cop car. And their handling is at 75%, which is decent, but it doesn't make up for the rest of the car being kind of cruddy. And on top of that, their special is, yeah, by far my least favorite version of the special. It's a mix of Twisted Metal 3's and Twisted Metal 2's special, in the sense that it's a one car taser this time around. It doesn't hit multiple vehicles at once like it did in Twisted Metal 3. But the reason I'm saying it's a mix of Twisted Metal 3 is because they decided to have a limit on the distance that you can be away from somebody when you're connected. So what I mean by that is in Twisted Metal 2, you could connect to one vehicle at a time. However, no matter the distance you got away from them, it would stay connected and do the full amount of damage it's supposed to until the special ended. Or in this game, you can only connect to one vehicle. It does, I think, 2 versions of damage. It does like a damage right away, and then you stay connected the whole time, and then it does one little burst of damage at the end, just like it did in Twisted Metal 2. However, you have to stay within a certain distance because you can get disconnected. So because of that, like, his special is pretty useless in this game, and even if you do stay connected to the entire thing, it's still super weak, at least compared to other specials in the game. It just feels like it doesn't do much damage. Just like Warthog, I feel like they really took Outlaw's idea and they just trashed it. I don't know why. That being said, though, are they as bad as Warthog in this game? no, I can still play Outlaw just fine, and I can get through a full tournament and have a decent time with it. It's just when I'm comparing them to every other Outlaw in the series, they are by far the worst one, and it's really just a big disappointment. But I'm going to have to put them down in the C tier for now. And last but certainly not least is Piecemeal. This is the first time, once again, of a new character in the Twisted Metal series, and they're really unique. They're cool, but they just kind of, just like Mr. Mime, feel kind of like a prototype vehicle. It doesn't feel like a full, fleshed out character. I don't know why, but I'm glad we are able to play as them without using Game Shark or anything. You can unlock them in the game. However, the funny thing is that when you go against them as a boss, they're insanely large and super strong. Like, they have a ton of health. But when you play as them, they're actually a relatively normal sized vehicle. They don't look any larger than Mr. Slam, and they don't have that much armor to boot. I mean, it's not terrible. They have 60% armor, looking at their stats. And then their acceleration, their top speed is 40%, and their handling is 60% as well. So stats alone, they're pretty mediocre, right? And the only real benefit to Piecemeal is they have the exact same special as Mr. Mime, so of course they have every special in the game, and it works the exact same way. So they're really just the bigger brother to Mr. Mime, and they're the better choice because they have more armor and they're a little bit faster. So yeah, I mean, Mr. Mime I gave a B tier strictly for their special alone, so of course we got to give Piecemeal an A tier. They would have been S tier if they actually were as strong as they were actually in the boss battle, but sadly that's just not the case, so A tier it is. So this is the very first time that my tier list is mostly S tier, and it just kind of goes down from there. That's pretty rare, at least from my experience with my previous tier lists, but I don't think I'm going to change up anything. I think this is where I would put everybody the way that I thought I would at the beginning of this. I don't think there's anything I would change. So yeah, that is my full tier list of Twisted Metal Small Brawl characters. Let me know in the comment section below your tier list of your special favorite characters from S tier to trash tier. And I just like to remind everybody once again, my opinion does not matter. If you don't agree with me, that is totally fine and justifiable. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, because I love hearing your guys' discussions. And we've been having a lot of love and support on these tier lists, and I'm really excited to get into the Twisted Metal Head-On tier list that's coming next. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one, and make sure to leave a like, share, support as always. We'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out.